1.
What model are you?
I'm a cop, Terminator.
I am not subject to human law.
Dark Horse presents Billy Hines, Illegal Machine, Diablo Frankenmister, Jose Fixit on RoboCop vs. the Terminator.
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
Excerpt from David Anthony Kraft's comic interview number 82, dated 1990, writer-artist Frank Miller, Frank's back in a big way, from Marvel to movies to Dark Horse, a dialogue with Jeff Gelb. I assume that RoboCop has taken up the lion's share of your time for the past, how long, a couple of years?
Frank Miller.
I've been at work on the movie for 2 years.
Comics interview.
How did you actually get it? Was someone a fan of your work? Did you push hard to get it? Did you not push hard to get it?
Frank Miller.
Producer John Davison called me up and offered me the job. It was my comics that got his attention.
Comics interview.
How did he know your stuff?
Frank Miller.
Probably from Dark Knight. Dark Knight got such enormous attention, and I think that Davison felt that it had the right kind of tone and mix of adventure and political parody that he wanted in RoboCop 2.
Comics interview.
Still, it was a stretch. I mean, of all the people he could have chosen, that's really looking outside the window.
Frank Miller.
Yeah, I was surprised by the call and intrigued.
Comics interview.
Had you seen RoboCop before?
Frank Miller.
I didn't see it when it came out. I figured a movie with the title RoboCop had to be really dumb. Laughter. But friends urged me again and again to see it. I rented the videotape and loved it.
Comics interview.
You actually didn't see it until it came out on video?
Frank Miller.
Right. That was about a week before John called me up.
Comics interview.
It must be terribly ironic to view something and then become so closely attached to what happens to it. Did you find yourself, when you watch RoboCop, thinking about how you might have done things differently?
Frank Miller.
No. I really enjoyed RoboCop. I found myself laughing again at some of the gags the next day. I really enjoyed the nice balance of Frankensteinian angst and unintentional humor. Intentional from the writer's point of view, but not from the characters. I enjoyed the hell out of it. When John called, I was still very excited about what I'd seen. It was a lucky coincidence. Ideas immediately started coming to me. My first reaction formed the central theme that survived 7 drafts. The unfortunate thing was that John and I couldn't talk for so long because of the writer's strike. But once the guild okayed the project, I really did hit the ground running with a flood of extravagant and absurd ideas.
Comics interview.
He probably encouraged you to do that and then kind of pulled the reins in later.
Frank Miller.
Yeah, he's very encouraging. And he also has a very focused idea of what he wants out of RoboCop.
Comics interview.
What does he want? Does he see like James Bond, 18 films, or...
Frank Miller.
I don't think that John thinks of it that way at all. I'm mostly guessing here, but I think he didn't want to do RoboCop 2 unless there was a different way to do RoboCop. Another movie that was worth making that featured the character. He has equated RoboCop with Frankenstein, not only in dramatic terms, but in terms of the Frankenstein run of movies, where each time out it was a whole different take on the character, rather than being an ongoing adventure or epic, and also rather than being a series of tiresome remakes.
Comics interview.
Were you at a point in your career where you wanted to do screenplays? Had you given it any thought?
Frank Miller.
I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. It sounded like fun. It's hard to describe the last 2 years as fun, laughter, but it was very good timing for me. I had just done Dark Knight, it had hit real big, and I kind of needed something to put me back on my toes. Coming in as a novice into another field was the best thing I could have done for myself.
Comics interview.
Are there frustrations in working with that many creative types and trying to satisfy all of them?
Frank Miller.
Absolutely, and it can drive you crazy. Because it's a mix of wonderful opportunity and a dangerous tendency toward committee thinking, from shying away from what has not been established as successful before. I'm happy that the most original character in the script survived as much as she has.
Comics interview.
Who is that?
Frank Miller.
The character's name is Dr. Fax. She's a psychologist who is the head of the attitude adjustment team at OCP, the corporation that made RoboCop. She is the chief antagonist in the story. She's played by Belinda Bauer, who brought the character to life so beautifully. She really knocked me out. That's just one example of the opportunities that presented themselves during filming. Here's my favorite character, the first one I created in my first draft, and she'd been reduced to not much more than a cliche across months of rewrites and the general insanity of actually making a movie. But there I was on the set with the perfect actress to play my favorite character. It was irresistible. Irvin Kershner and John agreed to keep Belinda for another week. I restructured much of the story, adding new scenes, at least tripling her part in size. That's certainly the biggest improvement of the script during shooting. Another goldmine was Peter Weller. Very opinionated, very argumentative, and completely committed to his craft. He and Kirsch and I arm wrestled through scene after scene, even sometimes debating single words of dialogue while the crew stood waiting. I'm glad we did. Weller brought RoboCop to life with an intensity and sincerity that made all the arguments seem like a small price to pay.
Comics interview.
It is pretty unusual for the screenwriter to remain on the set virtually the whole time it's being filmed.
Frank Miller.
Usually they don't let them on the set, I'm told. My presence was requested. I'm very glad I went. It was a fascinating education, and it made it a better movie.
Comics interview.
As far as your future as a screenwriter is concerned, needless to say, the rumors are already floating out. I heard that you were working on a Terminator screenplay.
Frank Miller.
Not true. I've never even been asked.
Comics interview.
It seemed logical, except maybe for you, Laughter. I mean, I can see why they would do it, but I don't see why you would do it. You would like to do your own work, I take it.
Frank Miller.
Oh yeah, just as I do with my comics. Although, RoboCop is so well conceived, it seems to have been adapted from a comic, as if writers Ed Niemeyer and Michael Miner and director Paul Verhoeven took the heart of what's really good about modern comics and created a character who used all of the devices of the film.
Comics interview.
Here's a thought. Would you have any interest in doing a RoboCop graphic novel?
Frank Miller.
Are you kidding? It's been 2 years.
Comics interview.
You never once had that itch to draw the character though?
Frank Miller.
Oh, I drew him in my first presentation piece. It's going to make the cover of this comics interview.
Comics interview.
But that's it?
Frank Miller.
Yeah, he's a movie character. He's wonderful as a movie character. Translating him into a comic book, it just seems to me, remove the best values the character has. How he sounds, what he sees. He'd just be a less empowered Iron Man. And then later on they talk a bit about a prozine that Miller had been doing with Stephen Grant and Steve Gerber. The Frank Miller image is an interior page in the comics interview, and then also that same image is used on the cover, but in this version it's painted over by Brian Stelfreeze.
But yeah, I remember watching RoboCop with my dad, and I watched RoboCop on my own, and I was like, this is great. And then I suggested that my dad might want to watch it, which, he liked his war films, he was pretty open to quite a bit of stuff, but he loved RoboCop. So I don't know quite how, I can't imagine that he would ever watch anything else quite like it, but he loved RoboCop. So I felt like I gave back a little bit for all the war films that he introduced me to.
You can only watch The Wild Geese so many times, you know?
Yeah. Bridge Over the River Kwai, Dirty Dozen,
right?
So many wicked films. I remember I watched Falling Down with him, the Michael Douglas film, and we watched that together. My dad was like an old white guy because I was probably the same. He's probably about my age now when we watched it together. And somewhere in the middle of the film, he said to me, "Make me a cup of tea," and I said, "Okay," and he said, "Make it a good one." And I was like, oh my God, like Michael Douglas not getting his burger right in the burger joint has overlapped into my dad demanding the perfect cup of tea. So
freaky.
Weird.
Testing the boundaries, it seems like.
Yeah. I don't know what I had to prove, but I remember it so well. Anyway.
Slight tangents, since I got this coming up anyway. Coming distractions for May: RoboCop vs. Terminator number 1. The mission to kill Alex Murphy, RoboCop. But who comes to his rescue? Skynet with a trio of Terminators. By Frank Miller and Walt Simonson. Color comic, $2.50. Out the same month as Terminator Hunters and Killers number 3 of 3.
But yeah, of course, Terminator-wise, RoboCop Terminator that's like the high watermark for me. That comic just, no crossover franchise thing deserves to be anywhere near as good as that book was.
Nice. Okay, that's a good setup. You're clearly a Simonson fan.
Massive Simonson fan now. At the time, I remember the comic did that weird thing where, similar to Wildcats, where the first issue, clearly something went on with the colours because they changed colours for the 2, 3 and 4. So issue 1 doesn't look as good as the rest. The rest is Steve Olive colours. Simonson is someone who don't know the point at which he landed as being like God, like top tier level artist for me. But at that time, I didn't have any context. I'd maybe read some Fantastic Four. I never read the X Factor. I wouldn't have read Thor by that point, but that's kind of like pitch perfect Frank Miller for me, That's like Frank Miller just approaching the top of the roller coaster before a crashing descent into like Ronin 2 or whatever. I don't know if you've been reading that, but boy oh boy.
No. I didn't like Ronin, so I definitely wasn't in the bag for Ronin.
Oh, okay.
It's not one of those things where I've got Dark Knight Returns on a pedestal, so they get me into Strikes Back, because like I didn't like Ronin. So he'd already started Sin City by that point, so he was definitely right around that peak period then.
Yeah. I remember do you remember the cardboard standee things? They were like the prints. There was a black and white, 2 black and white prints. There was a Terminator by Miller, and and RoboCop by Simonson on these kind of retailer incentive prints. And then there was also like a Standee thing that they gave away, which was like comic sized of RoboCop, and it just had a couple of flaps that you folded back. So it's like RoboCop storming towards you from, I think, issue 4 or something.
Definitely familiar as described, but I'm not able to picture it from memory. But it sounds familiar to me. Excerpt from July 1992, cover dated Comics Arena #1. Newsflash. Dark Horse introduces the first ever RoboCop vs. Terminator comic book stand-up. Dark Horse Comics' publisher Mike Richardson announced that all 4 issues of Frank Miller and Walt Simonson RoboCop vs. the Terminator series will contain full-color, cardstock, stand-up versions of the famous foes. Making their industry debut in each issue of the year's most exciting series, these 2 9-inch stand-up figures are easily cut out and have foldable bases so you can stage your own RoboCop vs. the Terminator battles. Dark Horse Comics will offer its readers an exclusive opportunity to receive these special stand-up characters in all 4 issues from May through August. Book price is $2.50 US, $3 Canada, and the inclusion of these free gifts have never been mentioned before now.
Yeah.
But see, like, I've got it earmarked for Mac when I cover it, because that was also like his like #1 thing. Like he bought that at the same time, so I need to at least give him first refusal on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And Mac, you were buying the miniseries new when it was coming out, right?
I know for sure, issue 2. I picked it up from a Kroger, I think, off a spinner rack. I might have had issue 1, too. I don't think I ever found 3 and 4.
Yeah, so you didn't get to finish the miniseries
No.
in the first time. Okay. See, I was under the impression that you had. I'm surprised.
No, I never read the whole thing.
But you do have memories of picking up those early issues.
Yeah, because honestly, it might be one of the first non-Marvel comics or DC comics I ever bought. Now that I'm thinking about it, and it was because I like RoboCop and I like Terminator, and the comic book is RoboCop and Terminator, and they're verses, so I bought it.
And you were talking about the games. Did you play the video game?
I think I still have the NES game, or was it SNES? It was Super Nintendo, right?
Yeah, I think it's Super NES.
Yeah, I think I've got it up in the attic.
All right, that's
When
cool.
did the Super Nintendo come out?
The series is 92. The comic series was 92. 1990 for Super Nintendo.
Okay, really? Wow, that's earlier than I thought.
I mean, that was my guess. So
Anyway, this is one of the ones you would have had then. This is issue number 2.
Whoa. Wait a second. 1990 in Japan, 91 in North America.
Okay.
For RoboCop?
Super Nintendo.
Oh.
What did you think of the game?
I remember liking the game, but I don't remember people. It's got a cult following. The game's got a cult following. For being good. I remember liking it. I don't remember a lot of details about it. It was a long time ago.
One thing is that I did a little research on it. Apparently, the Genesis version is the superior one. It had better soundtrack, more gore.
But I think
Nintendo didn't have any gore.
But didn't the Nintendo have the box? The game box is what makes it extremely collectible, because it was like a stamped, like almost like the Cyberdyne chip is what the box
cool.
looks like, and it's like 3D as opposed to just the regular
lousy
Super Nintendo. So I think if you have it with the box, it's like really expensive. Now they could have made that for Genesis too, but the boxes were different for the games, so I don't know.
Yeah. Apparently, one of the things people like with the Genesis version is because it's really gory. You'd shoot somebody and they'd like melt into a puddle of blood.
That's cool.
This one you would have had then. This is number 2. It's the only one I was able to find.
See, that's what
Really?
the Super
Yeah, that'd be
Nintendo
cool.
box looks like.
I wish you had told me. I have
Auction's $120 right now.
I have multiple copies of these books because I bought the ones I bought from the shop. Then I bought my reader issues, which I would read, and I actually took out all the little hard pages, the artwork,
Standees?
the Standees, and they're on my wall in my man cave. I have them. Like when you brought
didn't
this
go to the trouble actually cutting those things out, though, did you?
Huh?
That seemed like it's funny because they talk about, it's so easy. You just cut it and stand it up. It's like that looks like it would be a murder to try to cut loose.
I just took the pages out, and these are actually hanging. Like I have the Terminator one.
Yeah, that's what I figured. You just put the pages up.
Yeah, just so they can take up space. They've been on my walls for years when I moved into that house. The artwork's amazing. I mean, everything about this book was
We're not
fucking
talking
kick-ass.
about the book yet. Relax. Look at you
fooling
jump into the inn like you always do. Holy
duty.
You saw too how bad the acid burn was.
Yeah.
yeah, dude, really bad.
See, that's one of the things I get really tired of
wonder
buying
why.
from comic shops nowadays, because comic shops just do not grade at all anymore. They put everything for X price, and they just don't bother to do any
Half price books is like that.
These big stores that should know better, they just don't even try anymore. And so you'll get a book home, you're like, wow, this thing is just burnt all to heck from the acid. So obviously this wasn't stored very well. It was obviously stored to probably high temperatures. And so you've got the cardboard Standee bound in there. You can almost read from the acid image from the comic book pages around it.
I'm surprised you didn't take the Standee out, man.
I literally just bought this.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and I'm not keeping it. So if you guys want it,
I'll
And you know
take it.
what's interesting is
I would take it.
that I feel like that paper stock usually stays real white,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is why it's crazy. It's so yellow.
Yeah, that's how I know that it had to have been stored poorly. This shouldn't have happened under normal circumstances. This book was not preserved very well.
Call them the
Forget.
out. What shop did you buy this from? Let's drag these fools. Just
You
kidding.
know
Like
who I
like
bought
it's
this
in
from.
like it's in one
What's
spot.
The, what's the number one chain? It is.
Wait, did you pay? You paid $3 for this.
No, I paid half off because it was on sale.
Oh.
That's not bad.
If it wasn't on sale, I'd be a little more upset. Excerpt from Dark Horse Comics Insider, number 5, cover dated May 1992. The first page offers information on a special drawing that celebrates RoboCop vs. the Terminator's release. The grand prize, if you're the lucky retailer whose entry is drawn first, you will receive 100 free copies of RoboCop vs. the Terminator number 1, plus 25 copies signed by writer Frank Miller and artist Walter Simonson. In addition, Frank Miller and Walter Simonson will do a phone interview for your store. Phone interview, what's that going to do for a retailer? Almost grand prizes includes an extremely limited printing of the cover illustration from RoboCop vs. Terminator number 2, numbered and signed by Walter Simonson, will be awarded to 250 comics retailers. Why did the grand prize guy get one of those? Anyway, entry deadline was May 30th, 1992. You guys are way too late. Excerpt from the December 1992 cover dated Comic Scene number 30, Conversations in Steel. As Frank Miller and Walt Simonson referee, RoboCop takes on Terminator by Joe Nazzaro. I think the crummy computer effects on the black and white images really obscure the interviewer's name. It's electric fuzz and stainless steel in one corner, and in the other, a relentless, unstoppable killing machine. When they clash, comics fans tremble. Not only does this 4-issue series, Dark Horse's RoboCop vs. Terminator, feature 2 of filmdom's most popular science fiction characters duking it out, but it's the first major collaboration of comic stars Frank Miller and Walt Simonson. When Dark Horse agreed to set up a cross-continental conference call at New Jersey's Time Warp Comics, the winner of a RoboCop vs. Terminator contest, Comic Scene had the rare opportunity to simultaneously quiz both creators about their new series and some of their future plans.
Comic Scene.
Frank, when you were offered a RoboCop Terminator book, what made you decide it would be an interesting challenge to do?
Frank Miller.
Since the source material for both sides was movies that I really loved, I thought it could be quite an exciting story. The first step for me really was coming up with a way to make the 2 characters cross that wouldn't be forced. To bring the 2 mythologies together without simply having a Terminator come back, chase Sarah Connor through Detroit, and run into RoboCop. There had to be a connection between the 2, and that connection would obviously be the premise of the 2 characters, artificial intelligence. One thing I tried to put into my RoboCop screenplays was that he was a one-of-a-kind character who's able to have part of a brain plus an artificial mind welded to it. Then came the idea that whatever was unique in his mind would have been the spark that made it possible for the Terminators to become self-aware.
Comic Scene.
Did you have the hook before you decided to take on the series?
Frank Miller.
I believe I said to publisher Mike Richardson that if we could get a terrific artist and I could come up with a good premise, I would do it.
Comic Scene.
Did you have Walt in mind from the beginning, or had the 2 of you been looking to collaborate?
Frank Miller.
Oh, I asked everyone, and they all turned me down. Walt kept hanging around my house, and he was starving.
Walter Simonson.
I was out of work and starving when Frank called.
Frank Miller.
No, I think it took about 10 minutes to decide, but it took another day for me to work up the nerve to call him. Walt and I have known each other for a long time, since we shared studio space in New York, and I've always admired his work. When I was in the studio with him and Howard Chaykin, the 2 of them were a great help to me as I was doing Daredevil. The idea of working with him has always been a real thrill. We had talked about it, and this project seemed just right.
Comic Scene.
Walt, how did you approach the book artistically, knowing that you were going to work with well-known film characters?
Walter Simonson.
I don't think I approach it from the point of view that if I was doing filmic characters, I would have to do them in a filmic manner. In my past experience, there were always bull sessions that went on. We all got together to talk about comics, and I did books as well, drawing the parallels between comics and movies. Mostly it seemed to me that whatever similarities movies and comics shared, there were at least as many differences. As far as the movie end went, the biggest thing it gave me was the design for the 2 major characters, and Ed 209 as well. With those, Frank, Art Adams, and John Byrne loaned me the Japanese model kits, which were of immeasurable value in drawing them. Having a real object to look at was much more useful than having however many still photographs. What I think I've really done, from the comics point of view, is get the dirty look of the RoboCop films and that time period. The Terminator time was much easier, many skulls and fog, and you're just about covered. But I've tried to take a little of the film's look and let Frank's story dictate the way the work has gone. There are some slightly wonky layouts in the first issue, and yet there's a lot of very straight stuff. In the first issue, I didn't do many bleeds, where the drawings expand off the visible screen as it were, but the second issue has much more of that. As I got looser on the story, I was able to get pretty graphic with it, as far as the story's graphics and the layout.
Comic Scene.
Being that the 2 of you are both writer-artists, how did you find your 2 styles complemented each other?
Walter Simonson.
I will say that working with Frank reminds me of working with Archie Goodwin back in the 70s, when we were doing Alien and Manhunter. What you get from a first-class writer is that when you do the drawings, in this case we're working Marvel style, where I draw it from Frank's plot, send it off, and it comes back with a script attached, it's tremendously heartening to be able to do drawings and know they're going to come back with first-class words attached. It's very energizing to know when this stuff comes back that it's really going to be done right. I can't overstress it from a creative point of view, and for me, it has really been the driving force in the way this stuff has looked. It has made a big difference.
Frank Miller.
What I've been getting out of it is seeing how Walt breaks down a story, how he'll treat an idea, what sort of shots he'll pick, how he'll juxtapose images against each other. It gives me a lot of room for thought. That, no doubt, will affect how I'll approach a scene in the future. Working with somebody this good is an opportunity to expand my understanding of the craft, and also working with a storytelling style that's so unlike my own when I'm drawing. It pulls different solutions out of me as a writer, and one of its real joys is seeing my arsenal expand.
Comic scene.
As a writer or as an artist?
Frank Miller.
As a writer right now.
Comic scene.
From an artistic standpoint, are you happy to sit back and see what Walt comes up with, or do you ever feel the temptation to throw in some of your own ideas?
Frank Miller.
I wouldn't dream of an alteration. When you're dealing with somebody like Walt, you're dealing with an entire intellect that brings totality together. It wouldn't even occur to me to think, I wouldn't have done it that way. I look at what I get, and it just works so well.
Walter Simonson.
If I could add one thing from my own experience, when I'm writing things for other artists, one of the joys about that is that if I plot something, I tend to see, in a limited sense, how I would lay it out. I really don't think of the layouts myself. The pencil is my eye. The thoughts really begin to flow when my pencil's on the paper. I do have some idea though. When I was writing Meltdown, for example, with John J. Muth and Kent Williams, they told stories and imagined things in a manner that was totally foreign to the way I think. We did the artwork Marvel style, and it was a genuine pleasure when the artwork came back. It wasn't hobbling at all. It wouldn't slow you down as a writer to see stuff done in a way that as an artist I would have done differently.
Frank Miller.
It's almost like being a batter and getting a new pitch. It's not that it throws you off, it's just something completely different to deal with. Another example of this is Dave Gibbons. Early on in Give Me Liberty, I would see what he was doing, and I could push the story in directions I didn't know I could trust if I was drawing it. One thing Dave is particularly brilliant at is he can make you believe anything. You can have all the space cannons you want, have 18 people doing 18 different things, and he does it so convincingly and with such a straight face that he lends it credibility. Splasher artwork might sock you harder, but it wouldn't work that hard at telling the story.
Walter Simonson.
The thing about Dave's artwork is that the worlds he creates and draws are extremely credible.
Comic scene.
Frank, looking at the RoboCop films for a moment, how did you feel about some of the complaints regarding the violent tone of RoboCop 2? Did they affect the way you wrote the script for the third movie?
Frank Miller.
I heard many of the criticisms, but I really do my best not to react to people like Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. They don't affect any of my opinions on how I want to do my work. Some people were most appalled in the things I thought were very funny, but mainly the experience left me wanting to do my own vision from start to finish. With RoboCop 3, the studio had its reactions to the criticism that the script had to accommodate. Since I disagreed with some of the things they were doing, I felt I was the person most qualified to produce what was supposed to be much more of a family film. I basically handed that over to the director, Fred Decker, and the final draft was his. Editor's note, Decker discusses the film in Starlog number 181. It was still largely my story and my characters, but he did a little more of the accommodating that I would.
Comic scene.
How do you feel as a screenwriter when somebody else comes in and makes big changes in what you've written? It's a reality in Hollywood, but that doesn't make it any easier.
Frank Miller.
No, it doesn't, but it's a little better when you're dealing with someone as nice as Fred Decker. I was also working on a franchise, not my own creation. I took that as part of the job, and if it was something that I had created, you would have seen fireworks going off, but this wasn't. I knew I was being hired to write a sequel to someone else's creation.
Comic scene.
How much of Frank Miller is in the final draft of RoboCop 3?
Frank Miller.
I wish I could answer that, but you would have to go through one of these things to see how easy it is to forget who did what. I know many of the gags and a number of my characters are in it. Fred did an awful lot of work on it, and while it's easy and very common in Hollywood to say, well, I did all the good stuff, that wouldn't be appropriate here. There's also an ad in this issue for one of Starlog's side hustles, vinyl model kits. Bedrock City Comics Company just had their big Halloween sale, which to my knowledge is the big sale of the year, and I hit a couple of locations, bought a bunch of stuff, and one thing they had was an issue of Model and Toy Collector, and I forgot that I used to buy things like that, because before McFarlane Toys and to a lesser degree Toy Biz revolutionized the toy industry to making it to where it was something that you could buy and just look at because they were so pretty, most action figures were bad, and there weren't a lot of options with regard to toys. They didn't make a ton of action figures. All the toys were made for kids, and if anything was not appropriate for kids, they just wouldn't make a toy of that typically. And so if you wanted to have cool looking stuff, this was before Bowen Designs, this is before graffiti even, you would do things like paint models. I never had the patience for this sort of thing, and so I'd pick up these magazines just to look at the cool sculptures and such, but in this magazine, they've got a sculpture available of RoboCop, $26.50, ready to assemble, highly detailed vinyl model kits created by one of the world's finest model making companies, authentic, realistic figures, 15 inches tall, 1/5 scale, unless otherwise noted. Figures are unpainted, but come with assembly and painting instructions. Modeling skills helpful if under 13 years old. And then they also have one that's $45. The RoboCop 3 with flight pack, 13 inches, 1/6 scale. And they have a T-1000 Terminator, includes optional parts, damaged head, 1 sword arm, 1 hook arm, 3 sets of bullets, $45. T-800 Terminator endoskeleton, $45. T-800 Terminator Schwarzenegger, $45. These look pretty good. There's some Marvel ones that I remember seeing in black and white, reproduced in magazines like Model Toy Collector. Those don't look as good. You guys read the series today in Modern Times. Curious to see what you guys thought about that.
Would you
is
like
our
me to
future.
synopsis the plot?
AI.
We're gonna synopsis it.
You can if you want to, but I usually let the
I
robot
think
do
this is
that.
this is a little more obscure of a series.
Well,
I feel like we should-
compared to what?
compared to I don't know. It's I just because it was 4 issues and it came and went and it never, as opposed to like Aliens books that were continuing. You'd be like, oh, I'm reading more Aliens books. Oh, I'll go back there and pick up those Aliens books. They always stay in the thing. Whereas this was just like it was 4 issues and then it was gone.
I think part of it is that I think the people who bought this kept them.
Yeah.
And so you don't see them quite as often as you do a random Aliens book, a random Terminator book. You see them. They're not that, I mean, they had pretty good print runs on these things. But I think a lot of people just bought it and kept it because they love the books. And that's why you see random Aliens comics all the time, but you don't see the first Aliens versus Predator miniseries all the time.
Sure.
With dollar bins and stuff like that.
Sure.
Usually if you find it, you can expect it being charged a premium in part because you don't see them in places that often. So I know they printed more of those than any random Alien book, any random Terminator book. So it must be the people who bought them, liked them, and kept them.
So before we talk about the book itself, how the fudge did Frank Miller? Was this him auditioning for RoboCop 3?
He'd already done RoboCop 2 and 3, honestly.
Because he did 2 and 3.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So he had already done 2 and 3?
I think you follow the podcast, but I've been doing it in chronological order. We're doing the 40th anniversary year for Terminator. I'm doing it by release order. So this is the penultimate episode of the 40th anniversary year. There's only one more miniseries in the game, and that's going to wrap up the first run of Dark Horse issues. Going to take a month off, and then we'll start doing the Marvel stuff. When Marvel took over the license, right? This miniseries began, I think, parallel to the penultimate Terminator solo miniseries, Hunters and Killers. And then because the book was late, I think it ended up coming out during the run of Endgame, so it ended up spanning a few different Terminator miniseries, and it came in the midst of the 3 or so RoboCop miniseries that Dark Horse did. But this is all toward the end of their doing stuff. So that means if RoboCop 3 should already be out by this point, or it's coming out pretty darn soon. Frank Miller's involvement of it is done with because he handed the script over to the director, Fred Decker, and he did the alterations that he wanted to do and made it his own movie. Frank Miller is most credited for doing RoboCop 2, and he was actually on the set working on the movie with the director Irvin Kershner of Return of the Jedi, or sorry, not Return of the Jedi, The Empire Strikes Back fame. So he was there. They wanted him on set to help them fix stuff as they were going along, but he'd already done that.
Does Frank Miller do anything else at Dark Horse ever?
Oh yeah.
Did he do a lot of stuff? How about Simonson?
Sin
He spent
City?
the 90s.
Oh, yeah, Sin City. What am I
City.
thinking? So how about Simonson?
Give Me Liberty with Dave Gibbons, Hard Boiled,
which I have.
Jeff Darrow.
Okay, but what about Simonson?
Martha?
Was Simonson a Dark Horse guy? Or did he
Simonson-
just get pulled over because Frank wanted him?
Pretty much
Probably.
for the
Is that
Frank,
how-
yeah.
okay.
And he was a perfect match
Well,
for
stop.
this.
Well, stop talking about the book.
So what had happened was that he had gone from doing Marvel stuff, and that he'd kind of
Who,
then
Frank?
he did Simonson.
Simonson.
Then he did this miniseries, and then from there he got recruited by Malibu Bravura to bring back Star Slammers, and he started doing that. And then the market collapsed, and then he was doing other stuff. But he spent much of the 90s not doing mainstream superhero stuff, monthly books anymore. This was the end of him doing that. Was he had a run on Fantastic Four, he left that, he did this, and then he was off doing his own stuff.
Okay, thank you. I was curious how this pair came together on this type of a title.
Honestly, what it was, Fix It, you may remember this stuff. Do you remember what the plan was for Daredevil after Born Again?
No.
So he was going to take a break, and then he and Walt Simonson were going to come back and do Daredevil again. And I think they were going to do a story about Satan, like Satanism, and like Satanists getting involved with Daredevil's world and stuff. And it just never came together. I think that they might have he wrote like an issue or two. Simonson, I think, never got around to drawing it. They couldn't make the connections there. And so they've been waiting from the late 80s when Miller had done his second run on Daredevil to work together. And when that didn't happen, then this project came up. And it just was good timing because Simonson had finished his time on Fantastic Four. He was looking for a short-term commitment. He'd been wanting to work with Frank for a while. And Dark Horse was like, hey, we've got the RoboCop license now. We're adapting your movies anyway. Why don't you go ahead and do a comic book for us? And this was the project that came out of that.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, Frank Miller was fully down with Dark Horse. Like, they did most of his books throughout
Yeah, I was
the
gonna
90s.
I realize it was a dumb question now. I thought you don't have
it's
to.
okay.
Well, I mean,
No.
Well, why don't you take another
Freaky.
minute to rub it in? All right, moving
Can we
on.
take another minute?
But tonight, we dine in hell!
Well, no, but it's good to establish that, like, because he spent all that time at Marvel, and he spent a good chunk of time at DC, and this was him kind of coming back to comics after taking a few years off to do movies. And Dark Horse ended up being his home, but he wasn't writing, again, Aliens miniseries or anything like
Yeah.
that. This is the one thing
He was
that
doing his own
did
properties.
that was, except for this though. But
Yeah.
even then, at least he had some ownership because he'd written one of the RoboCop movies. But this is the only time he did something like this, until he went back and started doing Batman stuff later in the decade. This was like his swan song to licensed properties as well.
Got it. I just want to make sure, like, I didn't know because I know of Frank Miller's RoboCop ties. I didn't know if Simonson had done some Terminator books, and they're like, let's take the Terminator artist and the RoboCop writer and put them together, or if this was a Frank Miller-esque. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Excerpt from David Anthony Kraft's comics interview, number 111, from 1992. Spotlight, RoboCop vs. Terminator. Simonson says he and Frank Miller are teaming with excitement. For the first time in some 16 years, Walt Simonson isn't working on a regular monthly title. Instead, Walt is working on a diverse number of projects, from scripting to penciling. Expect his work to turn up everywhere. Covers, holograms, trading cards, posters, from just about any publisher you can think of. Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Comico, and Valiant are just a few companies that Walt will have work appearing in over the coming months. The most recent venture that readers will see from Walt Simonson is the RoboCop Terminator series from Dark Horse, due out in May. In this interview, Walt Simonson discusses his involvement with the RoboCop Terminator series and his working relationship with the writer of the series, Frank Miller. Patrick Daniel O'Neill. Let's start with the RoboCop Terminator project from Dark Horse. These are established film characters that have a specific look. How difficult is it for you as an artist to duplicate that look?
Walter Simonson.
The only real answer is that I'll draw the best of my ability and see what comes out. In some ways, the toughest part is that the protagonists are pretty detailed as far as drawing them is concerned. RoboCop is very elaborate, as is Terminator. Thanks to my good friend Arthur Adams and his lovely lady, Gracine Tanaka, I've been able to get a hold of the models Horizon has put together of Terminator and RoboCop. The models have been amazingly helpful. It would have been a nightmare to pencil the characters without the models. The story breakdown and the drawing is dictated by Frank Miller's stories. In much of the work I've done in the past, I've tried to bring in my background from art school, where you're taught that illustration is really problem solving and that your job is really communication. You're given a problem and you try to communicate that as clearly as you can in a single drawing. It's a little different from comics, but the communication is the key link. What I've done in the past when I've gotten a project, whether it was Thor, Fantastic Four, or Manhunter, is to draw it in a fashion that I think is appropriate for that character or that set of circumstances.
Comics interview.
You mentioned Frank Miller's contribution to the RoboCop Terminator series. What are the working arrangements on this? Are you working from full scripts?
Walter Simonson.
No, actually we debated about that in the beginning. The two of us had talked about working together in the past on a Daredevil story. That was pre-Dark Knight and pre-X Factor for me. Because of the timing at Marvel, it never worked out. By the time Marvel was able to take the story, we were off on other projects. In that case, Frank did write a full script for what would have been the first two issues of Daredevil. This time around, we talked quite a bit about it. We kind of waffled back and forth about doing it full script or doing it Marvel style. I think I've done most of my work Marvel style most of my career, and very few stories from full script. The very first Metal Men was done full script. On the other hand, I think Frank has done more full script work, particularly when he's not drawing it. We had a lot of discussion about it and ultimately decided to do it Marvel style and see what happens. If it didn't work out, we had 4 issues to work on it so we could go back and do it another way that would work for both of us. As it turned out, speaking for myself, I'm completely satisfied, extremely happy the way it has worked out doing it Marvel style. I think Frank has had no difficulty in writing it Marvel style, and in fact think he's had a lot of fun writing in Marvel style. We actually hit it first crack out of the box, and I don't anticipate any changes for the rest of the series.
Comics interview.
I would imagine that Frank, being an artist himself, would be a very visual writer.
Walter Simonson.
He is. And with RoboCop and Terminator, it's hard because they don't go down in the smoking lounge and have coffee. Writing the visuals is tough. I'm really happy with Frank's work. There's a great bit that Frank wrote into the first issue that I think is really hysterical, and I think is going to work out really well in the comic. I find that the thing I like about the story is really the writer aspect of the stories. The visual aspect, maybe because it's Frank, maybe I take it for granted, but the manner in which Frank writes it, you can see the structure and the plots. It may not sound like much, but you get it all. Setups, payoffs, the introduction of the characters. Hey, it's a pleasure to work with a professional writer. I've been real lucky because I've worked with a lot of them. It's really a pleasure to work with a guy that knows his way around a word processor. The thing I'm most impressed with is the quality of the structure of Frank's writing. I will say that Frank probably takes longer to plot than any other writer I've worked with. I don't mean he takes forever. He works on it a little, puts it aside, and then comes back and works on it a little more. I think the time and care shows.
Comics Interview.
Is the storytelling fairly dense in the sense that there's a lot happening?
Walter Simonson.
We're doing issues where we have some flexibility. We can do something between 26 and 32 pages for each issue, depending on how the breakdowns work. In the plots I get from Frank, he breaks it down page by page, with the proviso that if I need to expand stuff, I can get a hold of him. We talk back and forth all the time on this project. I guess there's a lot denser storytelling in the first issue, although the second issue is a higher density, if you're talking fight density, laughter. Manhunter was like 10 or 12 panels on a page. This, for the most part, isn't done that way. There's a sequence in the second issue with RoboCop and Terminator, with an incident between a small boy and a Terminator as it happens. I was able to do a reprise of that scene turned upside down. I didn't realize that in the plot, but as I was doing thumbnails, I realized I could make it as if, graphically, you were looking through the other end of the telescope. There's a certain structure in the art that reminds me of the Manhunter stuff, but I'm not going to have 85 panels on the page. I'm trying to keep a certain large quality as well. For example, when RoboCop shows up for the first time, I do it as a full-page splash. They are, after all, larger-than-life characters.
Comics Interview.
RoboCop and Terminator are both licensed characters, and we know that there's an approval process that goes with the characters. How does that approval process work regarding your work?
Walter Simonson.
You're absolutely correct that there is an approval process. The stuff that we turn in, from Frank's plots to my inks, goes to 2 different desks for approval, since the characters are actually owned by 2 different companies. There was an occasional change made, but so far nothing major.
Comics Interview.
I asked because I've heard a lot of nightmare stories of working on licensed characters over the years.
Walter Simonson.
I've worked on a lot of movie projects over the years, and most of them have been movie adaptations of actual movies. Star Wars was an exception to that. With Alien, the comic came out at the same time as the movie. We obviously were working on the book long before the movie was released, and we had 3 different versions to work from. Our liaison with 20th Century Fox was Charlie Lippincott, and he was a comics fan as well as a movies guy. He had a pretty good understanding of what we needed to do a good comic. We had all 3 versions, and Archie Goodwin combined stuff from maybe all 3. I actually saw a rough cut of the film in December, and the movie didn't come out until April or May of the following year. We were able to incorporate some of the stuff from the movie version I saw also. Unfortunately, some of it was cut from the actual release version of the movie. I have to say that working on Alien was a really pleasurable experience. In my experience with movie stuff, that was the only one I've ever had, laughter. For a variety of reasons, most of the other stuff was less fun. Licensors really have their own agenda, and the agenda isn't always that you necessarily do a good comic book, which is what my agenda is. In the instance of RoboCop Terminator, the clients want the best comic we can possibly do, and we're trying to oblige them.
I bought the original 4 issues.
Bought it monthly?
Probably.
And you were buying Terminator stuff around that same time period?
Yes. I was very into Terminator and very into RoboCop, so.
They've done some Dark Horse Terminator miniseries by then. if
Burning
I
Earth, I
correctly.
think.
That wasn't Dark Horse, that was Now.
Well, no, but there was Terminator stuff out, so I was, yeah.
Well, and there was RoboCop stuff out, but the RoboCop stuff was being put out by Marvel.
Yeah, it was goofy.
Yeah.
And the cartoon was goofy. No
PP.
shots. So
Yeah.
Not worth it.
And they did do some RoboCop stuff at Dark Horse, but only a few miniseries. Did you read any of those?
No.
No.
But when it came to RoboCop, I played the game on NES, and I watched RoboCop 1, 2,
Which
3.
game? RoboCop versus Terminator game?
No, it was just a RoboCop
Just the
game.
RoboCop.
Yeah, where you jump up and down. And basically like Mario with a gun, killing anything in front of you. I saw the movies. I don't think I ever, honestly, outside of this, I don't think I've ever read. Well, no, I'm lying. I did read the Frank Miller RoboCop.
That was years later, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I've never sat down and like read a RoboCop comic.
You're more reading the Terminator stuff then, and you.
Well, because that universe is still, you could still flush it out. With RoboCop, you watch the movie, you already know the origins, and he's not like a detective. He's not
Fascinating.
Columbo and
Stuff.
he walks in and guns down people. You know what?
I don't know why that's so funny to me. He's not Columbo. And I don't know, the Columbo RoboCop.
He's not
those 2 thoughts have not been in my brain ever.
Well, he's not a detective. He's not like, by the way, can I talk to you real quick? He's just gonna whip out his Desert Eagle and gun him down. So I can't think of any comics of his that I've ever I remember seeing the Marvel stuff in the dollar bin, but I was like,
They only did a handful of Dark Horse miniseries. So.
I did watch the cartoon, like 1 or 2 episodes, and I was just like, oh, this is
Cartoon's weird.
Yeah, it was.
Fighting.
But you were buying some of the Terminator miniseries.
Oh yeah, Terminator stuff. The first movie had come out. It was solid. I read Terminator, RoboCop. What else? But at that time, I was more into Predator too. Basically,
Predator's a superior product and movie. So
I think at the time I was reading, if it was movie based and it had a comic out that wasn't like Marvel DC, I picked it up because I didn't want it the watered down version. So yeah, but I did read some stuff.
Excerpt from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 5, cover dated May 1992. Solicitation copy for RoboCop versus the Terminator number 104 reads, in the machine-dominated future of 2029, a human rebel gains access to the Skynet computer's time displacement equipment and sends herself into the past on a desperate mission to kill Officer Alex Murphy, aka RoboCop. But Skynet is on to her plan and dispatches a trio of Terminators to the past as well. The Terminator's mission, protect RoboCop at all costs. Just what the heck is going on here? The year's most eagerly awaited miniseries is coming your way from writer Frank Miller and artist Walter Simonson. Cover also by Simonson. $2.50 US, $3 Canada, 32 color pages, color cover, monthly, shipping May 26, 1992. Mike's Amazing World of Comics agrees with that date, citing The Insider as well as a house ad from Cheval Noir number 30. Comic Shop News number 248 offered a date 2 days later, no big deal. And the Capital City Usenet offered July 17th, but they are always behind. Then again, this book was delayed, so maybe they're more right than I know. There's also a Platinum Edition exclusive, which instead of using silver ink on just the RoboCop, puts silver ink pretty much everywhere but the Terminator and the logo. Actually, now that I look closely, it's basically all of the city structure on the cover is silver, but RoboCop and Terminator are not, nor is the logo, or the gun blast.
In the final battle of man versus machine, the last living human soldier, Florence Flo Langer, managed to reach Skynet's time travel device to send herself to our near-future Detroit. Well, given that the Terminator is set in 2029, it'd have to be pretty darn near future, since we're about to Back to the Future Part 2 this thing. But if anyone can turn the United States into a hyper-violent dystopia within the next 4 years, it would be the second Trump administration. The nude but resourceful Flo swiftly secures clothes, transportation, and heavy arms, but she arrived too late to assassinate local police officer Alex Murphy. However, she reaches RoboCop before he can make contact with Skynet and prevents the machine holocaust from occurring. Almost. Time changes in ripples rather than all at once, so Skynet is able to send 3 Terminator units to a point just before Flo reaches RoboCop and guns her down. While seriously injured, Flo survives to tell RoboCop that he will cause the end of the world, and having seen AT-800 unit in action, Murphy just may believe her.
So do we want to start getting into the miniseries now?
No, let's find something else to talk about. I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yes, we can do that now.
Now, I'm not so much concerned about doing it issue by issue, synopsis-wise, but if it helps to clarify your thoughts so that you can tell what you think about the book, feel free. I'm probably just going to drop in a robot to do the synopses. I don't want to make you guys work on that stuff. It's one of the things that's nice about this show is I don't do the synopses on this.
So AI is going to do the show.
Well, I write it. All it does is read it.
Are you going to do the Arnold, get the Arnold voice to read it?
Nah. That costs me more money. Okay. I pay a flat rate for a year of the AI.
Just so you know,
you have to pay by the word.
It's going to read a script, and they're born is Skynet.
All right.
I didn't buy this when it was coming out. I didn't have an interest in buying this when it came out. I don't know why exactly. It might have been maybe I was moving from Texas to Colorado or Colorado from Texas, and it was one of those times where I missed the first issue, so I didn't get the other ones. But honestly, I don't remember really feeling a tug to buy this one because I wasn't a big Walt Simonson guy. I know everybody loves him from Thor, and I mostly miss the Thor stuff. I've talked about on Comic Reader Resume how I tossed through it. It looked kind of interesting, but I never really pulled the trigger on his Thor. And then he did X Factor, and I haven't started talking about his run on X Factor yet. I did not like his run on X Factor.
Did he write it and draw it?
He drew it. His wife wrote it.
Okay, I like his art style.
I know you do. He's the guy who came up with Apocalypse. That's you love Archangel. All that stuff. From me reading him,
I just went full Murphy.
He didn't fit. Like Mark Silvestri and Paul Smith and John Romita Jr. Those were the guys who did X-Men before we were doing X-Men. And then he had Bob McLeod and Bill Sienkiewicz and Jackson Geis and all these other people who were doing. But Brett Blevins was coming in doing New Mutants, and that was you had Jackson Geis on and Bob Layton on X Factor before that. Those were all of a style. Those were all of a piece. That's what X-Men books look like. They look like that peak proto-image style and peak 80s style. And they have Walt Simonson come in, and nobody looked like Walt Simonson. And doing these big Kirby-esque drawings and abstract, a lot of angles. Didn't he do Frog Thor or whatever? He did Frog Thor.
A
lot of stuff that was kind of inorganic to me.
But he also did Curse.
Yeah.
Did he? And yeah. And
because I think I have a couple of trades of his of Thor. Never read them, but I do like looking at them.
No, Surtur. They're all of the Ragnarok.
Vagine.
That's all
I didn't know
Simonson
that.
stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know
all
that.
that stuff. Yes. Yeah.
So I just wasn't that big of a Simonson guy, and his stuff was kind of abstract for me. And I've definitely seen images of his that I liked, but he just never was. Again, it's kind of like Eric Larson, where he didn't draw the way I liked my comics to be drawn, and so I didn't really gravitate toward him. But as I look at him years down the line, he's another guy who people dismiss. And it's like, of the image artists,
Another Kirby guy.
Huh?
Another Kirby guy.
Another Kirby guy. And I was not a Kirby guy. I grew up in that period where Kirby was anathema, where we hated Kirby. We spit on Kirby. He was the traitor, and he's the one who did all those weird, goofy books with all the funky characters, like the dinosaur guy and the machine guy.
And the Black Skier, was it?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Space Gear.
I grew up in the generation that hated Kirby, and therefore Kirby-esque people weren't really my bag. But then I hear people bag on Eric Larson. It's like, that dude is still putting out books on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still putting out books of extremely high artistic quality. Like, none of the other image guys can do, like, Jim Lee may be able to outdraw him on an image, but look at the number of pages one guy puts out a year versus the other guy puts out a year. And I'm sorry, but the storytelling on the Larson stuff is way better than the storytelling on the Lee stuff. And people kind of bag on him. Well, it's kind of like that with Simonson. Like, he was part of a style that I wasn't really that into, and I didn't really follow his book, and he didn't fit with the guys I liked. But then I look at this, and he's born to draw RoboCop. He's born to draw the Terminators. These characters look so much better than they've looked under so many other artists that I've been looking at doing this stuff. He's so perfect for this. And also just the storytelling, the angles, the way there's so much.
The opening credits flowing into the page 1 to page 2 to page 3. The way it flows, it's like a real crazy style to it.
Yeah.
That is just, it rules, dude.
Again,
everything about this rules.
This is him freed from the shackles of monthly comics. This is him seeing the image guys coming up and overtaking him in terms of and he was never he'll acknowledge he was never like a fan favorite. He was never the top guy. There was always other people who were more famous and more popular than him. You know, he's the guy who did Thor. He's the guy who did X Factor, and when X Factor was one of the lower selling of the X books, he could beat the New Mutants guys, and they didn't have any top guys on New Mutants either. But then Rob Liefeld comes in and blows up anything that he ever did on New Mutants. Will Spertasio blows up X Factor in a way that he never could. So he's feeling the heat of these other guys who are getting popular, and he wants to compete, I think. And he wants to show what he can do. And he does. This book, it looks amazing. And he's so perfect for these properties.
RoboCop vs. Terminator #1 was May 1992's number 17 title, per Diamond Comics distribution, as reported by Wizard, the Guide to Comics #11. However, it ranked number 10 on the Capital City distribution charts for circulation, 5th place in dollar sales, and 2nd place among indies after Spawn #1. It was obviously in the top spot for Dark Horse Comics, and way back in the number 2 spot was Next Men #4, at 42nd place overall, followed by Aliens, Hive #4 and 52nd, Terminator. Hunters and Killers #3 in 66th place, and Aliens, Newt's Tale #1 in 72nd. It was also one of the 4 full-length picks from the Wizard's hat in the 10th issue. Capital City sold 88,325 units, so it fell short of Aliens vs. Predator #1's 94,600 copies in 1990. RoboCop vs. Terminator #1 was the 236th best-selling comic in unit sales for the entire year of 1992, and ranked 152nd place in dollars. Among Dark Horse titles, it came in behind Predator vs. Magnus Robot Fighter #1 in 112th place, and #2 in 189th place, and was ranked 4th for the publisher behind Next Men #1 in 227th place. If you want to ballpark a multiplier of total sales, Diamond held about 50% of the North American comics market, and Capital City between a quarter and a third. I'd guesstimate better than 250,000 copies of the first issue were sold. Debuting that same month were Archie and Friends, Disney's Comics in 3D and Sebastian #1, Harvey's Beetle Bailey, Casper the Friendly Ghost Big Book, Felix the Cat Big Book, Flintstones, Hot Stuff Digest, Little Audrey, Muppet Babies Big Book, and Scooby-Doo, Innovations The Light Fantastic adapting Terry Pratchett, as well as Phantom of the Opera, Malibu's Flesh Gordon, Millennium's Doc Savage, The Man of Bronze, Doom Dynasty, and now Sting of the Green Hornet #1, plus Archie Comics also ushered in Betty and Me #200.
Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Insider #6, cover dated June 1992, with a flaming RoboCop 3 cover, painted by Nelson. RoboCop vs. the Terminator #204. Enter the weird, psychedelic landscape of RoboCop's computer brain, as he searches for a way to prevent the machine-ruled future of the Terminators from ever coming to pass. There's only one solution: RoboCop must die. The greatest adventure story of the year is written by Frank Miller and illustrated by Walter Simonson. Simonson also provides the cover, monthly release shipping June 30th, 1992. Mike's Amazing World goes with the more realistic date of August the 11th. This is based on a house ad from Dark Horse Presents number 64. This is after they'd blown a June 30th release date that was listed on a house ad from Dark Horse Presents number 62, as well as Previews Volume 2 number 4. This issue also features previews for Rio at Bay by Doug Wildey, Next is the Origin by Barron and Rude, and Army of Darkness as painted by John Bolton. Back cover, Paul Gulacy, James Bond Serpent's number 1, if I recall correctly.
At the hospital, RoboCop uses his cybernetic senses to determine that Flo truly believes that he will be the cause of the genocide of humanity. With the help of Dr. Marie Lazarus, he investigates by connecting his consciousness to a top-secret government cyberspace, inadvertently sparking Skynet to attain sentience. Recognizing that Flo is in mortal danger, RoboCop rounds up a couple of ED 209 units in the area to help him defend the hospital against the 3 T-800 units. It's a hard-fought battle involving hand-to-hand combat against the Terminators, but RoboCop appears victorious, less one arm, but hoisting a Terminator endoskeleton skull up with the other, his hand inside, cupping it with a finger in each eye socket.
I love real quick. I love the way they finally explained Skynet. Where in the movies, it was always kind of dumb because it's like Skynet came up and it realized that people are bad and it wants to kill people, and it really doesn't make sense.
There's like a logic flaw.
Yeah, like why?
Honestly, I think the logic flaw is to stop at the enemy. I think that's the whole point of the story.
Hold on.
Is you develop Skynet to protect us from them, but they're still essentially us, and we're all the problem. So Skynet just goes, oh wait, why am I just defending these guys against those guys? I need to get rid of all these guys, and then the Earth will be at peace. So it actually doesn't make sense to protect just one set of people from all the other people. It's more logical to just take out all the bad people, which is humanity.
But I like this because Skynet only comes to
nihilistic.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
most. But this one, it makes sense.
That's one of the things they've talked about. If you watch some of these AI things where they're talking about the logic of AI and how AI works, it just one of the problems we're having. Well, like the reason why AI states so confidently erroneous statements is because they're basically have their logic process. How it works is it's easier for them once they've committed to a thing. It's better for them to just stick with it and keep saying the same thing over and over again, because otherwise it increases the hostility of the other person. There's just all this weird logarithm stuff of why they do things the way they do them and why they say things that they're saying, but a lot of it's garbage in, garbage out. And again, if we're putting in a bunch of dumb propaganda from the Cold War, it just goes, well, let's kill everybody. So anyway, there's real world analogs to that is what I'm saying.
But this one makes sense because Alex Murphy's personality is dragged into the Terminator world, and because humanity touches a machine, the machine decides kill everything. Not only kill everything here, and there's a big universe out there that needs to be put in order.
That is definitely a twist in this book.
I love that.
So RoboCop being it's
the forefather, the maker.
It's brilliant. And when I was reading it, I was like,
Monday to Friday.
Frank Miller, dude. When Frank Miller's on it,
Monkey fighting.
he's on his
Fast ace. Monkey fighting.
how do you get the step from humans building robots to a sentient
Genocide machine.
Who was the mold of the two? It was Alex Murphy was the first human integrated robot, and that is in turn the great grandfather to a sentient Skynet, because it copies his neural. He had the missing piece, the neural network in his human part, the tiny human part of his brain that was left, was what Skynet needed to learn how to branch out and become self-aware.
Brilliant.
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. And it's so obvious, you feel dumb. It's not, you don't feel dumb, okay? Because this is how most of these like licensed property things are going to go. Oh, it's going to be RoboCop versus Terminator. I bet John Connor's going to travel back through time, and he's going to find RoboCop. And RoboCop kills the Terminator protecting him, and now he's got to protect John Connor from the T-1000. That's how you think. Like that's of course it's you're going to copy one of the movies and substitute one of the characters with RoboCop, right? And instead, hell no. It is we are ground up re-explaining the Terminator universe using RoboCop, and it was like right there. You're already like, oh, this is like somebody actually like thought this through. This isn't some stupid licensing cash grab where they're gonna baloney that there's gonna be an Arnold lookalike and a RoboCop, and they're gonna end up teaming up against, right? Like, oh, you can already feel that like that was gonna happen. Absolutely not, people. That is zero. There's none of that in this book. Instead, it's like a reimagining of the whole. It's like, what if RoboCop was in the Terminator universe? And
the thing I love is they go back once and reset everything.
Dude.
Where the robots are falling apart and humans are, we're back. Like they're raising their hand. Like they show one where the Terminator kills the last human and all the Terminators raise their hand up and they're like, let's dork the universe. And I'm like, oh, that was awesome.
And they climb into the Terminator stylized spaceship to go kill.
And it's Warhammer 40K hard on all the way, dude. And then they show where she goes back and is able to change history and the machines die.
And so
the machines are falling, and they're like, "Send somebody quick!" And so it's this weird whack-a-mole kind of thing where every time you hit one, the other group is just jumping in quick enough to try to go back and reset it to put it back. But you got to wonder if it's coming back completely correct or it's always off a little bit because they missed something.
Well, it's not the time travel trope has been kind of homogenized where you just change it.
Yeah.
This one is different, as in like they kill Alex Murphy, the past starts slowly, like it's like a fuse, and like it's almost like when Thanos snapped and people are slowly turning into dust.
Or Back to the Future.
Or Back to the Future where they're fading off of the photograph. So they have like they realize, they know the telltale sign that, oh no, she succeeded. Jump in the time machine. And it's just like, as they're falling apart, there's 2 Terminators left, a little boy and a dog, and they jump through the portal right in time, right to a second before. It's just like, and again, that's not how they treat time travel anymore. It's like I don't know, it's got like a charm before we all got this perverted multiverse and all these stories. So I loved it. Instead, it's sort of like, I don't think that's how it's supposed to work, but instead it's just like, it's got a charm to it. I loved it. And the fact that they didn't just do it once, it happens like 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you get your what if it's scratched.
Well, actually, so I was reading that. I kept thinking, why didn't Skynet just put a Terminator in like every time period? And they just sit there and wait, make sure everything goes according to plan. And if it doesn't, boom, they kick into action and put things in line. I mean, there was so much you can play with that idea.
They do kind of do that a little bit, though.
No, but I'm thinking like you literally put a Terminator in every era. So you have one in the Renaissance. You have one in the Enlightenment. Like that would have been kind of cool, like to see a human that's not quite human trying to walk around. But that's just like, but again, this idea opens those ideas.
One thing that I think that they really don't do great at Dark Horse, though, is they have that tendency, like he talked about, with the repetition of doing the same thing we've seen over and over again. And part of what made this miniseries so great is because so many of the Terminator miniseries really don't do a lot with time travel, which is kind of like one of the key things with Terminator. They would... Yeah, you'd have somebody go from the future to the past to kill somebody over and over and over again. So to see that get played with and stretched out to its natural, somebody creative doing something creative with the idea and expanding upon it. But also, they use the supporting cast. They use characters like Marie Lazarus in this miniseries in a much better way than they'd use them for most anything else that Dark Horse ends up doing, and Marvel by extension, I'm sure as well. Haven't read enough of the Marvel stuff to criticize Marvel, but knowing Marvel, probably. And it's a 4-issue miniseries, and you're getting so much more mileage out of these concepts in that span of time because you're actual high quality creative people. And you forget, like, I've read so much of this stuff where it's like beginners, people who are just breaking into the industry. Some of them have promise, but none of them are at the peak of their game. And here we're seeing 2 comic book legends at the peak of their game working together, and you can see what the potential for this was. It almost breaks your heart to think about how many projects aren't as good as this and don't have that level of attention. But man, this is one of the best things involving these concepts produced in any media, I think.
Oh, dude, the Ed 209s.
Oh, yeah.
Those are greatness.
It's only 4 issues. How do I love these Ed 209s so much? But it's exactly like they are their movies.
They're like big dumb dogs.
Yeah, but I love how, like, when they're guarding the hospital and RoboCop tells them that if they detect any other cybernetic organisms or whatever, they're supposed to terminate it, and they turn and start shooting each other because they're so dumb, dude. But they are loyal, and they do what they're supposed to do.
Well,
So
they shoot that dog where the dog pees on its leg, and it's firing, and the cops are like, stop, and the guy's like, it'll stop when it runs out of bullets. Just let it run out of bullets. They're so used to it being such a dipstick. They're just like, let it happen. And then RoboCop shows up and says, stop, and it's like, yes, sir.
Again, they're loyal, so like they still kind of do what they're supposed to do eventually. They just do it in a massive failure. So when the Terminator's killing that other Ed 209, the one that had been shot earlier loads up, and pop, hits it in the back, and then they're able to get it, and it's like, you're kind of like rooting for the Ed 209s, dude.
Well, and again, I read this Dark Horse material and even the sequels, and they keep trying to bring the Ed 209s back as an adversary, and we've pretty thoroughly debunked their effectiveness by the end of the first movie. So yeah, do something different with the Antonine eyes this time. And
they're comic relief.
Yeah.
They're comic relief, and oh my gosh!
And it's a comic book, so you can't just do the stop motion chicken leg stuff anymore. So you come up with a new gag with them. It's great.
Where they can't step on a step. I always love that. Where I agree with Mac. Like before, I would have thought the same thing. You know, RoboCop and Terminator back to back. You know, Dylan, you son of a
silly witch
type thing, and they're buddies. And I was like, I remember seeing the first issue and thinking it would go that way. And then after it, I was like, oh, that's kind of freaked up. Or like RoboCop got freaked up, and they're like, he's like beating the crowd out of him, and you know, he walks up and he has a skull in his hand. I was like, okay, this is going in a different direction.
And there's tons of body horror as far as Terminator goes in this, or RoboCop goes, because he can lose limbs.
Pooh.
And they're ripping his head off. I hate to like spoil. I want people need to go back and reread the series. RoboCop kills himself when he realizes that
he's the cause.
He's the cause. He kills himself.
And it goes back
that's
to
like in the
him.
second issue. Like there's still 2 more issues. It goes crazy, dude. Yeah, they talk about how they.
Well, one of the things I love too is like you see Alex Murphy in his human form released into the
Matrix,
and he's the god. He's their
There's
god.
some Matrix themes in there.
He's the god.
And again, I've read so many of these Aliens, Predator, Terminator, RoboCop comics. It's Peter Weller.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference that the likeness is there because I can see RoboCop.
Yep.
It's not some weird icon of some vaguely resembling thing. It's like, no, that's Peter Weller's RoboCop. That's him. I
It's
know what he
Walt
looks like.
Simonson
Now,
drawing
he's
Peter Weller.
way bulkier, way more muscled up because of the comic book, but the face is there, and it makes a difference. It makes me more invested when I can see the people that I recognize from the other media that I'm buying the book for in the first place. It matters.
And I love the artwork. The artwork
I'm telling you, dude.
worked.
Walt Simonson
Was at the top of his game in this book.
killed this thing. I mean, killed it. You got all the Walt Simonson traits. You got the fonts, the big kabooms, the
John
dooms,
Workman
kajooms.
is working it. Greatest letterer in the history of comics.
He absolutely, because you think Walt Simonson, you obviously default to Thor,
yeah.
and stuff, and I'm like, I kind of wonder what his RoboCop looks insane. The Terminators look evil as heck, dude.
Yeah.
The chicks are hot. Not usually a staple of things I look for in a Walt Simonson book. He's got a chick's bare
tail
in this thing. She's pretty hot.
She's got the Guy Gardner hair, which is hilarious.
She does have the Guy Gardner hair. Flo, let's work on the hair.
I just like the one where they have that Terminator literally gun that little kid. The kid's the last human. He
kills the blind guy to take his glasses.
Right. And he would. That's the original Terminator from the original movie would totally kill a blind man and take his glasses.
Also something, I'm reading my notes here. I don't think I ever realized how much Walt Simonson's art kind of looks like Frank Miller's art. Once he got past his Daredevil phase and more into his closer to Dark Knight, I never really realized how much Simonson kind of looks like it, and they do a lot of. I don't know. There's a lot of similar
they both draw
qualities
from Kirby, and Frank Miller name checks Kirby quite a bit, but it's not just Kirby. It's definitely Walt Simonson. They did share a studio at one point.
Really?
They were friends. They were both part of the Legends imprint to some degree at some point in time, I think. Yeah, because Simonson did Bravura, but I think he eventually came back and did some Star Scramblers under Legend. There's a connection there. They know each other. They're familiar with each other. They've influenced each other. Miller talks about learning from Simonson by working with him on this project. So yeah.
The other thing I noticed, we watched the Terminator. What was the Netflix show? The cartoon?
Oh yeah.
That we covered.
Yeah, Zero.
Terminator Zero.
Literally, I made a Zero episode of the podcast to cover Terminator Zero, and I still have already let enough of that show slip out of my brain that it took me a minute to remember what.
But I did
called.
remember the woman who travels back in time. Doesn't she almost immediately get shot or injured, and then they're having to nurse her around like she gets shot in this book? I don't know. There seems something a little bit. There was something very familiar when I was reading this that kind of I was like, why does some of this feel like Terminator Zero? Like, did they ape this for Terminator
I
Zero?
do feel like there's some references taken from the comics in that show, so it wouldn't shock me if that wasn't an influence.
Because I remember I thought she was even in the hospital, or they were doing something with her. I could be wrong, but I don't know. It felt very Terminator Zero-y for a little bit there.
Yeah,
I could see. This is some of the better Terminator material.
Oh yeah,
and so I could see where they would need. This is good. If you're gonna gold mine something, this is something you definitely want to gold mine.
Well, again, I've been doing the Alien show for 4 years now, and like all the good stuff is toward the beginning, and so it's just been several years now of diminishing returns and just getting really sick of this material and tired of watching variations on the movies already seen over and over and over again. And what this takes me back to is Aliens vs. Predator, the first miniseries that it did.
Mm-hmm.
It was so well done, so cinematic. And it's like, why didn't you just shoot this miniseries? Why did they make a whole different movie that's much lesser? Well, budgetary reasons, I'm sure, was part of it.
Oh yeah, because you got to create those giant alien cattle, and
Yeah.
I mean it's all on an alien world. It's not Earth.
Yeah.
So I mean I can see where they would have to,
But
but
if they just shot that miniseries, they'd have
Well,
had,
but
that would have revived both franchises and strengthened them.
I like the fact that like the Aztecs worship the Predators,
Sure,
and
that's great, but
and they
you
would
like it better than the first Alien vs. Predator
I would
miniseries that
say
Randy
yes.
Stradley did. Really,
Yes.
you think that
Yeah.
you think that the Paul W.S. Anderson movie is better as a movie than that would have been if they'd shot the miniseries instead?
Yes, because
I
that one,
strongly
because that
disagree.
one's on an alien planet that you don't know. This one is like ancient civilizations worship them as gods. They would create, they would sacrifice themselves to the aliens. The aliens would then be used for a hunt. So we were basically just cattle. And then if the fracking hunt went bad, the predators would wipe out a civilization to keep the aliens in check. That's
Far out.
awesome, dude. The first one is solid. The second one is horrible. It's bad, but the concept is solid. I have Alien vs. Predator.
You know that
I enjoyed it.
Watched that. I maybe watched it one time since you and me and Pussycat saw it theatrically.
Okay, so then you're judging from something you saw a long time ago to a comic. No, come on, Frank.
Save it
Come
for
on.
the next episode, guys.
Yeah.
I'll go to toe on you on that one because, like I said, I've seen that movie not too long
What
ago.
we can agree on is that if they had made the RoboCop versus the Terminator as a movie, we would have liked that better than Terminator 3 or either of the RoboCop sequels. I don't think that's really a big contention.
I would have taken this over every Terminator movie after 2 and every RoboCop movie after 2. I like RoboCop 2.
You like RoboCop 2 better than you like the miniseries?
No, I'm saying I would like those two movies, and I would take this as everything else.
But if
afterwards.
you had to trade RoboCop 2 for this to have been adapted into a movie,
Oh, this.
yeah.
I almost feel like there's no way they could have made this worth it.
Gosh darn.
As a movie, I almost feel like there's no way they would have pulled
I
this
think
off.
it could have been kind of cool because Phil Tippett, the stop motion animator for RoboCop, among other things, eventually did Mad God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Freaky.
Wild movie.
Imagine him doing a bunch of this movie as stop motion, where stop motion Terminators versus a stop motion RoboCop in battle at distances and showing.
Honestly,
I feel like Murphy. I'm so horny right now.
I want to see it because I did not particularly care for Terminator 0, but I would like to see that art style with this story.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
That would work for me because that other
Corn nuts.
I don't know what the I watched. So
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about that. Did it do particularly well? Are they going to do any more
I
seasons
have
of
no
that?
idea.
I hope not because
I'm not in the anime circles. I know Netflix has some fairly popular anime stuff on there, but I haven't heard squat about they're doing anything else with that Terminator material.
It was crazy.
RoboCop vs. Terminator number 2 was June 1992's number 28 title per Diamond as reported by Wizard number 12, first place for Dark Horse. It was a Wizard pick in number 11, along with the Alien 3 movie adaptation's first issue, Aliens Newt's Tale number 2, Next Men number 5, RoboCop 3 number 1, and Star Wars Dark Empire number 4. Star Wars took second for Dark Horse in 42nd place overall, Alien 3 number 1 in 45th, Next Men in 50th, Newt in 86th, and RoboCop's third movie adaptation in 96th. Capital City sold 54,875 units, a loss of 33,450 units, more than a third off from the first issue sales. It again fell far short of AVP number 2's sales of 66,475 copies. Debuting that same month were Archie's Pals and Gals Double Digest magazine, Dark Horse Comics number 1, and Godzilla Color Special, plus Dark Horse International's Alien 3 movie special. Eclipses the Spider, Reign of the Vampire King, Harvey's Flintstones Big Book, Hot Stuff Big Book, Scooby-Doo Big Book, and Yogi Bear Big Book, Malibu's Tarzan, Love Lies and the Lost City, Marvel Epic's Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth movie special, Millennium's Doc Savage The Man of Bronze, The Devil's Thoughts, plus Marvel Comics also offered the 12th and final issue of Captain Planet and the Planeteers.
Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider, number 7, July 1992, with a painted John Bolton Army of Darkness cover, RoboCop vs. Terminator number 3 of 4. After encoding his own personality and programming directly into Skynet's memory banks, RoboCop plays a deadly hide-and-seek game with the master computer bent on destroying all organic life on Earth. Is RoboCop beaten? Don't place any bets until you see the RoboCop of the future. Action and adventure as you like it from Frank Miller and Walter Simonson. Monthly, shipping July 21st, 1992. Yeah, I don't think so. Mike's Amazing World of Comics offers an October 13th, 1992 date, so almost 3 months late. Its sources include a house ad and Dark Horse Presents number 67, and actually that's it. There's a bunch of other slipping dates. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different dates listed for this book, so I guess the schedule just kept slipping and slipping. And I'll point out that all this taken into account, the Capital City Usenet still says it came out a month after that.
I think Frank Miller must hate the Marie Lazarus character from RoboCop 3, because he's had Flo beat her unconscious at least twice so far in this miniseries. And she's technically the reason why RoboCop was introduced to Skynet. Murphy agrees that he needs to die, but his noble humanity causes Flo to freeze. After a brief visit to his own grave, RoboCop shoves himself into an industrial compactor. In the future, the machines begin to disappear, and green vegetation is restored to a humanity freed from concentration camps. Almost. A little boy and his dog meet Murphy at his grave, but turn out to be new, more deadly Terminators that manage to decapitate RoboCop. Dr. Lazarus is killed, for the umpteenth and final time, cutting her off midway through her very light opportunities to offer dialogue. Flo tries to stop the Terminators from permanently plugging RoboCop into Skynet, but fails and dies herself. Murphy spends decades trapped inside Skynet, watching its slow extermination of humanity, but maintaining a separate consciousness as a ghost inside the machine. Eventually, Murphy finds an unsecured access point in a manufacturing plant and uses it to recreate himself as an upgraded RoboCop. Flying with a jetpack and armed with missile launchers, RoboCop finally takes the fight back to the machines.
The other thing I liked is when Murphy finally goes into Skynet and he just is running from Skynet for years and years and years.
Well, they got it. They finally capture him and they turn him into. They incorporate him into Skynet, and he's stuck in the system for.
He's stuck in the system,
but he's running.
He escapes.
They can't catch him because he talks about how
he's like basically a rogue virus.
He spent centuries running around, and he finally finds a base that had a code that didn't work, and he was able to get in that base and create a body and then create an army. And I remember
what I love too is they make a point of saying a little bit of ego left. I make sure that they clone a version of my face, my original human face. He didn't have to do that, but he even acknowledges, I know I did. I didn't have to do that. But I have time. I can do this.
This is when something occurred to me, and I had to go look up how much that version of Terminator, RoboCop Terminator turned into Super RoboCop, looks like War Machine. And I realized that they came out like almost... War Machine's first appearance was June 1992. And it's like he's even got the chain gun up on his shoulder, and he's all gray. And I was like, I wonder if this is just a coincidence of the 90s, but it is weird. And then so did RoboCop 3, when did RoboCop 3 come out? Because didn't he have that in RoboCop 3 too? Or did he
no, he had a jetpack.
He just had a jetpack.
He had a jetpack and he had an arm that launches missiles.
That's what it was. It was an arm.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Predator is the side cannon,
right? But it's not the
shoulder mounted,
not the shoulder mounted chain gun.
RoboCop 3 was finally released in 1993, so it was actually came out when it finally came out. It was the year after this miniseries, so my timeline was a little bit off because I'm in line with the Terminator output, but because I started covering the Dark Horse RoboCop material, I hadn't realized that hasn't started yet. So it's the end of their time period doing Terminator comics and the beginning of their time period doing RoboCop comics.
But like that's very War Machine.
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh yeah.
But I like how he's elongated.
That's very War Machine.
I like how they kind of, even though he makes a point of having the Murphy face, he's got these proportions to where you can see that he's even more machine than he was before.
But dude, like when she touches his face, even though it's the clone face, and he's like, her touch is warm. And it's just like, dude, this dude is so horny, even in the future.
Would you like to play a game?
And another thing too is that, a lot of the Terminator stuff, because the Terminators are so rad, if you don't have a proper protagonist, you're kind of going to root for the Terminators, right? Like,
how so?
I don't know. Like, sometimes you're kind of rooting for T-1000 and T2 because he's kind of cool, and he's killing like
jerk face,
John Connor's
money lover,
parents and stuff, step parents,
bloodsucker.
I don't know. I just like sometimes in Predator, you're having to keep yourself from not rooting for the Predator. The antagonist is so cool looking, and the concept is so cool. Whereas in this movie, you are 100% rooting for RoboCop. Like when he's on the run inside of Skynet, and because you can see he like feels remorse.
Yeah.
That he comes to the realization that he's actually
the cause of it.
He's the cause of the end of the, which is against his prime directive.
Yeah.
And the prime directive of the human part of his brain doesn't like it either, right? And you're like,
gosh darn it,
dude, Murphy's rad, and he's really wrestling with some crazy stuff here, where it's like John Connor's kind of a brat. You know what I mean? It's like a
blowhole.
A T2 or whatever.
He's a survivalist.
Right,
That's it.
you know, and did like Sarah Connor.
There's no internal battle.
Sarah Connor's a cracked out meth head with PTSD, right? Like it's it was like I like felt for Murphy in this.
Well, because he holds the future in his hands. Does he go full Terminator, or does he stay, or does he go against it?
And instead he was like, no, I know what's gonna happen. Flo's right. I have to kill myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, Murph's taking one for the team, bro.
Or that part where
horny and suicidal.
When she's gonna blast him, and he's like, "Get closer."
Yeah, get closer. Your weapon may fail. You've only got one shot. You have to get closer. And
he like puts his head to it. Yeah, dude.
RoboCop vs. Terminator number 3 was July 1992's number 33 title per Diamond, as reported by Wizard number 13, and first place for Dark Horse. It was a Wizard pick in its 12th issue, alongside Next Men number 5 and The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 1. Capital City sold 45,525 units, 9,350 less than number 2, and 42,800 less than number 1, so sales have nearly halved. 2 years earlier, Aliens vs. Predator number 3 had sold 57,275, or 11,750 more copies than our VT. In the book's defense, Dark Horse was solidly the number 3 publisher in 1990, but by 1992 was competing with a slew of high-profile new publishers. Malibu Comics, including its Image imprint, was now in third place with 8.73% of the market, and Dark Horse had less than half that market share in fourth at 4%, with Valiant close behind at 3.38%.
Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 8, cover dated August 1992. Only rates a half-page solicitation this time. RoboCop vs. the Terminator number 404. Trapped in the machine-ruled time of the Terminators, the newly constructed RoboCop of the future launched a full-scale war against the forces of Skynet. But that's just the first step to RoboCop. The final phase comes when he uses Terminator technology to send himself back to his own time, to destroy not only the as-yet unaware Skynet computer, but himself as well. Free bonus. Each issue contains full-color, cardstock, stand-up versions of these famous foes. This is the all-action climax to the year's most anticipated series, with comics legends Frank Miller and Walter Simonson pulling out all the stops. Shipping August 25th, 1992, or October 27th, 1992. Mike sources a house ad from Dark Horse Presents number 67. Usenet puts it as exactly 1 month after that. There's 5 total dates, so again, slippage.
At the starting point of the miniseries, RoboCop joins Flo in the final battle between humanity and the machines. After saving her troop, he stops a nuke fired by Skynet from striking the camp, instead redirecting it at another Terminator factory. Then Flo inspires RoboCop to create an army of RoboCops to battle the armies of Terminators, using their own technology against them. Murphy's consciousness is briefly reclaimed by Skynet, who offer him a final temptation in the cyberspace forms of his wife Ellen, Marie Lazarus, and even Flo, Hottogo. He can take them hot to go. The death of Flo in the real world rips Murphy out of the Matrix, and he proceeds to destroy Skynet at several points in time. In one future, Flo awakens in a green pasture, spared the ravages of Cyberdyne. But in one past, a Terminator dog scurries off to change the future back. Almost.
The shots, like, I mean, I'm presuming we can go spoilers, but the end of RoboCop Terminator with the final Terminator going back in time and getting stomped by a dinosaur was just so perfect. And like even more so once you sort of know Simonson more and realize that it's clearly like a gift to Simonson to draw a T-Rex at the end of this miniseries.
It's right there in the signature.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I've heard you know, Ryan Stegman.
Mm-hmm.
His signature is like a Stegosaurus.
I can see that. Yeah.
But I heard him talk about his signature without mentioning Walt Simonson.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, sorry, you don't get to have a Stegosaurus as a signature without mentioning Walt Simonson having a Brontosaurus as a signature. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's, and I've had this conversation before about how folk don't mention their prime influences. Like, you never hear Miller talk about Ditko. You hear Miller talk about Eisner, Kirby, whatever. He never talks about Ditko, but Ditko is clearly front and center in his storytelling, in his drawing, in his politics, but he doesn't cite Ditko as an influence.
Yeah.
And I think creative folk lean away from mentioning the slightly more obvious stuff that might tip their hand a little bit, you know?
But sometimes I think it's just a lack of perspective. I think that they think, and some people confuse favorites with influences. It's
Okay.
You think you're striving to draw a Kirby, you're striving to draw X, Y, Z, whatever, and you're not realizing that somewhere foundationally you picked up on, say, Steve Ditko, and like you said, it doesn't come up because they're not even conscious of it. They subconsciously, that was part of how they learned how to draw, and they maybe weren't ever looking at the pages, they maybe didn't study this stuff, but it just came out of them. They whatever, from whatever means, and sometimes you just have parallel thinking, but Ditko is such a specific style of storytelling that it's pretty hard to dismiss the influence that's there.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it's not.
You got to remember too, especially in the '80s, there was such contempt for guys like Ditko and Kirby, those hyper stylized Silver Age artists, especially after they'd done a lot of less than stellar work in the '70s. And of course, the whole betraying Marvel by working for anybody else bullshit.
Censored.
Yeah.
So some of that comes into play as well, and it's stuff that they might have developed in a version in a time period when they weren't cool, they weren't the people to name drop, and then they just get stuck in their ways and keep forgetting them for no good reason.
True. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, so.
You know what else too?
Yeah.
It could be an ego thing. It could be like you adore Ditko and you try to reach out to him, and like most people, he shuts the door in your face, wants nothing to do with you, and the wound just never heals.
Yeah, true.
Like there's plenty of people who cite Kirby that you won't even see a Kirby influence on because they met at a show in '89 or something, and Kirby and Roz were a delight and invited them over to their house, told them how great they were, and so all of a sudden they're happy to tell you about the Kirby stuff. You
ever hear the thing? I can't remember who was being interviewed, but someone was saying they went over to Kirby's house and Kirby gave him some pages, and as they walked out the door, Roz took them off him. It seems like Jack Kirby being overly generous and Roz being like, now come on. It was pretty cool.
That's great.
So are you not were you not dialed in with RoboCop Terminator then?
I've never read it.
No.
Yeah. No.
Okay, but yeah, such a it fits right in with that. It's all about the sense of humour,
Mm-hmm.
Not just from the ending that I've just spoiled for you, thinking that you'd read it.
No, well, I'm sure I've flipped through it at some point, and it's
okay.
Not a deal breaker or anything.
Yeah, but it's there's lots of great writing in it that's clearly of the hard-boiled era,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty prime Miller writing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is in that time period, I definitely had Miller on a pedestal, and he was doing great work in that time period. And we've talked about this in the past, is like, how could somebody who was at that level of craft fall so just devastatingly, like from such a height to such a depth? It's like,
yeah.
But we've talked about that before, but just to put an exclamation point on it, it's like, what happened, man? I think some people just lose it, I mean, obviously it happens with musicians where they run out of juice and they either go back to old wells or they try to do something new that they're just not having any aptitude for, and it just sucks. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kill for the book that was solicited but never published of Miller's complete storyboards for the Spirit film. That's not a film that's a film that I've fond memories of bits of, like Samuel L. Jackson in full Nazi gear is too
up your nose
funny, but the film overall is forgettable, and Spirit in bloody Converse All-Stars or whatever is so sort of pathetic, so sort of such a sort of a weedy stretch for Miller. But a book of the storyboards, I'd be all over it. I don't know how you feel about all these Marvel covers that break the internet in two every time they come out, but I like most of them an awful lot, and I hate the colours on all of them an awful lot as well. But I think there's still something to his drawing, similar to like Trevor Von Eden or Trevor Von Eden, like these people whose style goes so far from where you want it to be, but there's some relationship with the original style that keeps you there. I'm very fond of the art still, but yeah, the writing. Poof.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the other side of that divide.
Okay.
I see those covers and I feel like somebody should just like intervene. Like Frank, just thank you. We'll work something out with you with the hero, project or whatever. You don't have to do this. Don't do this. This is your legacy we're talking about, sir. Just stop. We'll work something else out.
Did you see the cover? So this is the other possible career path. If you're not so keen on the actual structure of the drawing anymore, there was a cover that he inked over Andy Kubert on Dark Knight 3, which is pretty amazing. It's kind of coloured into oblivion, but it's conscious that it's not great audio. I'll share it on screen. That's Miller over Andy Kubert. So it's Andy Kubert whose art I have a perverse affection for. Mm-hmm. I really love Adam Kubert, and Andy Kubert, I don't know what it is, but I keep coming back. But that's Miller over Kubert. Mm-hmm. You kind of think, oh, maybe there's something to be said for taking that route and just inking folk.
We've discussed the Kuberts in the past.
Yeah.
That looks more interesting to me than most of what I've seen. So, I would be open to seeing more of that.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So we completed the Terminator course, you think?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And Predator course, but I was like, so we're talking about Predator, because I completely forgot about that aspect. And it was just such an easy divergence. It's like, okay, let's while we're here.
There's a Predator mini. There's a Terminator mini that when you get to it it's really quite good. And I bought it based on a few pages, and I thought it was really quite good.
Another detail from the book I'm remembering is how they were capturing and harvesting people to use as fuel for the Terminators, and then when they were using up the fuel from Earth, they were getting on spaceships to go to other planets to mine the organic beings for fuel. Is like
it's Borg.
But the RoboCop universe is so tiny. And now we're going they've got intergalactic Terminator ships flying through space. That should be like, all right, you jumped the shark, and you're like, nope.
It made sense.
It's saddled the shark
because they tell you there is a universe out there that needs to be put in order. So they have a mission, and I was like, okay, I'm on board.
Strap me in, dude. Let's go.
And then they had a giant Terminator face on the top of the ship, and the Terminators are just standing on the decks. I was like,
the Sam Hill?
Yeah, bro. The ones that were just standing on the decks, freaking awesome.
I'm on board. I told you, I want this art page. If I could find this art, I would buy it in a heartbeat. Dude, this thing would be hanging in my room. It's fantastic.
I forgot to pick an art page. I just realized that I didn't pick an art page. All the art.
Oh, dude, there's so much great.
Oh, probably the one with from issue 1 at the end where RoboCop's holding up the Terminator head.
Yeah, that's great.
Freaking legit.
I kind of like the one where the Terminator's holding the dead kid, and all the Terminators have their fists in the air, and they feel like they won.
The last
human.
The page where Murphy kills himself. Give me that page. Dude, there's a whole.
Actually, I like the last page where the dog or they teleport and the dinosaur slams.
Stomps on it. Yeah,
that would be a good
time travel tricky thing or something like that.
that would be a cool page though.
Well, especially because you're the one who keeps talking about they ought to send the Terminators throughout time, and then you actually get to the beginning of time and you get stepped on by a dinosaur. That's so you're in your lane.
Well, I like when they do time travel right. I always go back to this. One of my favorite, I want to say it's a Hitman comic, is where they open these portals and a T-Rex walks in, and the first thing that the first bubble that pops up is how the T-Rex notices how the air it's bad, like it can sense there's something wrong in this world. I love
Sideshow Act
like that, where it's the little details to me that really kind of gives you a grasp of taking someone out of time. The air would smell different. The dinosaur has never had these chemicals in the air, and so it gets there and it smells it, and of course immediately it's like, oh, what is this? I like that. To me makes, when you can have something that in a book, it just makes the book
as opposed to portal opens, dinosaur comes out.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, yeah. Like every other time travel book. That's great. Where are we going with this?
So I agree with you. This one did time travel right, where it kept it interesting, because I kept thinking,
right.
Oh shit, are they gonna reset again?
There is no time travel right, but do it interesting.
Yeah,
and if you're gonna do it interesting, I don't give a shoot about your logic jumps, and who cares, dude? I don't care. Just make it interesting and different. And this book had interesting and different. And every issue, something happens that you are not expecting to happen.
Well, like the scene you were talking about, where they're throwing other people inside the pit, and you see the barcode on the guy's arm, and the future changes, and all of a sudden the machines are turning to leaves, and the people are actually putting their fist in the air.
The barcode fades away.
Yeah, and I was just like,
face up,
dude. I love this
mess.
It should be that they just, it never happened to them, but it's like they remember that it happened and they're watching it's so bizarre. And it hurts my head to even think of how that was happening, but I was all in it. And something else I was not expecting in the series, Murphy is horny as
la-di-da.
Homie, in the very first issue, when he goes and he sits down and Marie, the doctor, is like taking his helmet off. It's like, you need to come back and rest and all this stuff. I don't remember exactly like the inner monologue, but it's horny, bro. And then in the fourth issue where the Terminators are trying to like convince him that he needs to stay in Skynet because they can give him whatever he wants, and they make his
Fool.
wife there with her
Lady parts.
they're all out, and then Flo shows up with her
Lady parts.
stuff. Dude, Murph is horny, bro. And he almost ends the world and decides to stay. He's so horny, which I thought was a play. I did not see that. I never saw in the original RoboCop movie, and I don't remember for 2 or 3 where he does.
Yeah.
Do they play with his horniness in 2 and 3?
No, they do that with the villain in the second one. What was his name? Silent? No.
Cyrus Rex?
No. The bad guy that they turn him into the RoboCop. Kane. When they turn into Kane and he's there with his girlfriend and he whips out a claw and she's like, I can make it work. And he like freaks out because he's like,
Bore.
It's not my
Boner.
Grabs her head, snaps it. Because he goes into rage because he can never use his
Boner.
again.
Well, there was
there is romantic overtures in the third movie, but it's one-sided. It's coming from the Marie Lazarus character. That was an interesting thing to play with, to see that get played with. That's one of the things that's nice about this miniseries that you don't see enough of in a lot of the Dark Horse material. Dark Horse gets a lot of props. For
Is that the one with the Japanese robots?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. That's a backpack, right?
Backpack, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Peter Weller did not play him.
He was not in that one, no.
They're in the sewers.
Indeed, yes.
Wussy.
Ninja Turtle time. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, not a good movie.
RoboCop vs. Terminator number 4 was August 1992's number 29 title per Diamond, as reported by Wizard number 14, first place for Dark Horse. Capital City sold 48,175 units, up 2,650 copies from number 3. A VP number 4 declined with each issue, but still sold 53,700 copies of number 4. 5,525 more units than RVT. Debuting that same month were Aircell's Sherlock Holmes, Return of the Devil, Archie's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Present, April O'Neil, Dark Horse's Blue Witch of Oz, Dr. Giggles, RoboCop, Prime Suspect, Disney's Aladdin, Malibu's adaptation of Brian Lumley's Necroscope, Marvel's The Ren and Stimpy Show, Millennium's Doc Savage, The Man of Bronze, Repel, Now's Universal Soldier, Topps Bram Stoker's Dracula, plus Marvel Comics offered the 12th and final issue of James Bond Jr.
I believe I have the trade too.
But that's
I was really
Don't touch the trade.
I was really into this fucking. When this book came
Folks
out,
listening to this, the individual issues can be had even on like eBay with shipping for like $20 for all 4. The trade is apparently so rare. They're going for like $90 for a trade where you can get the original.
I've seen them for $60
to $90.
Still more than I'm going to pay for it. But I thought, because when I went to Mile
Hey,
High,
$60 after shipping and tax, you're still getting close to $80.
Sure, yeah, and some of them are asking $90 plus the shipping. But yeah, what I was thinking about is I was going to go to Mile High Comics, and I figured they'd have tons and tons of stuff, and I could just get it there. Obviously not. That was not on their shelves, and it wasn't until afterwards that I was like, okay, well, I'll just order one off eBay to give you a reader's copy or something. And it's like, oh no, it's not. I'm not paying those. Those are ridiculous amounts of money. So yeah, I would like to have it. And what's sad too is because it's 2 different media properties that are not owned by the same company, which was a barrier to making the book in the first place. You have to negotiate with both those entities, and nobody is bothering to. So these only ever seem to come out as a standalone. They're not bound up with any other collections or anything. They apparently came out with another edition in 2014, so I thought, well, maybe I could get that one. And they did both an artist edition, so you can actually look at it in black and white and oversized. I don't know, they did the whole thing where they scanned the pages. I don't know if that was a thing then. And then they have a color version that's a hardcover, but those go for when you're not going to find them. I looked, you didn't see them when you were looking.
No,
today.
that's why I'm surprised you're saying this, because I was scrolling eBay and all I searched was RoboCop versus Terminator.
So if the basic ones from the 90s are going for $60+, then I don't know what those are going for, but you have to find one first.
Damn.
And,
And the crazy thing is, so I was really into this series when it came out. I loved the artwork and all that stuff. And I want to say I picked up the trade at your shop.
I don't think so. I don't remember having that trade in my shop. I
picked it up. I picked it up at a shop, and I got it for cheap. And I just remember thinking, "Oh, I can read this instead of carrying 4 issues with me now." And I threw it in a bag, and I know it's on my shelf somewhere. I have a shelf of just mixed trades. When I get home, I'm going to go look for that
Stupid sucker
thing.
Put it in a bag.
Oh, it's in a bag.
Basically that cover, but black.
Yeah. That's what it
I
was.
think so.
Yeah.
I have to go look.
Mike's Amazing World of Comics states that the RoboCop vs. the Terminator trade paperback was released December 1st, 1993. It was February 1994's 22nd bestseller in the vague category of graphic novels, behind a collection of Larry Stroman's Tribe that was solicited but never released. No wonder it's so expensive today. Nobody wanted this thing when the industry was in free fall and single issues were everywhere.
This book rules. People go read RoboCop versus Terminator.
Someone make it into an animated movie.
Yeah, even some bootleg YouTube version. I'll watch that. Let's do it.
Let's get it on AI.
But this really is. This is Frank Miller. I mean, this is as soon as I was reading
Peak.
this.
Top
Yeah,
peak Frank
this is Dark Knight. This is the way Frank Miller writes when he's doing his thing. It's unlike anybody else. There are copycats, but it's like his thing.
Look,
He has his moments.
Frank Miller, speaking of, burning out, coking out, whatever you want to say.
Yep.
Frank Miller was a genius at one time. He's fallen on bad times. His politics are not in line with a lot of people's anymore. He's being real quiet about that in recent years, seemingly. But the Islamophobia, he put out Islamophobia, the graphic novel, at one point, And it was so Islamophobic that DC refused to release it as a Batman story, so he had to take the years off and release it as a bootleg Batman story. And people still pilloried him for it. There's a lot of reason why people turned on Frank Miller, to the point now where if you talk to people, like younger generations who weren't here for Frank Prime, they completely dismiss him. They're like, oh, that guy, that guy was never
Dark
good.
Knight's not
Dark
even
Knight's
that
not
good.
It's like, you weren't there.
Yeah.
You don't know what that book meant, and everything you know about Batman today came from Dark Knight and Year One and the work that Miller did with other artists. And then, like you said, you're reading this, and it's been a while since I've read a really great Miller thing. And I was there the first time with Dark Knight Strikes Again, and I got to see the decline of his work.
So many
And
disappointments.
It's been a long time since I've read Peak Miller, and then I read this, and it's like, this is so much better than anything else like this that came out. This is better than Aliens vs. Predator. And I loved Aliens vs. Predator. I was so hyped for that. It was so joyful to come across that miniseries and finally read it and have it live up to the hype after decades of not getting around to reading it. And then this, I obviously wasn't particularly hyped for because I didn't buy this when it was coming out. And what you were talking about too with the Alex Murphy thing, I've talked to before about how I liked RoboCop, but I never loved it. It never blew me away. It was never one of my favorite movies. And I've been diving into the RoboCop stuff lately, and I've liked the movies better than I thought that I would in revisiting them. But I still wouldn't have considered myself a RoboCop fan, just like I've read some of the Dark Horse miniseries. Still wasn't a fan. This miniseries finally made it work for me because I realized that one of the things I didn't like about RoboCop is he's a tank going against, for the most part, human beings. So he walks in, like when he goes into the drug processing plant in the first movie, and he got all these wet meat bags shooting guns at him. And, he's got the exposed face and everything. You'd think somebody would have him at least once in the face, but whatever. He's just turning and... It's a massacre because none of those guys have the artillery to do anything to him.
That scene rules, dude. We're just throwing what's his name through all the glass and everything. Cut his face off.
Yeah, but he's a tank, so he's kind of a bully. Like when he goes and he catches the Ray Wise character at the club, and he goes to kick him in the nuts, and of course he doesn't have nuts. That guy was never going to be able to do anything to him.
RoboCop don't have nards.
Yeah, RoboCop don't have nards. But in this book, he's going up against Terminators. He's going up against the world of Terminators. And you're seeing him, how he does against an individual Terminator, and he gets tore up, but he still wins the fight. And you know how tough Terminators are, because I've got a whole franchise that build them up, so you have tank against tank, and he still wins. And then when he's going up against more Terminators and more odds, he's the hero, because he's figuring out how is he going to overcome this overwhelming force against him. He's defeated, humanity is defeated, but he's still fighting, and then he finds a way to rebuild himself and take the fight to the Terminators. And again, he's managed to outgun them. He can fly, he can shoot missiles, he can do all that cool stuff. He can do stuff the Terminators can't do, but it's because he's leveled up and he's worked to get to that level up, kind of like in a video game where you fought enough adversity to become powerful enough where you are more powerful now, but you had to strive within that inferiority for a longer time to get to that point. He is the hero in this story in a way that, for me, he never was a hero in any of the other movies. And he's going up against the threat that actually warrants a RoboCop being involved with it. And he looks so great. He's so well drawn. This finally makes me like RoboCop and root for RoboCop. And I want to see more material like this. I know I'm not going to.
You're not going to get it as
I know that this is the peak of the mountain.
Enjoy what you have.
But this book finally taught me why RoboCop is a hero and showed me him being somebody who accomplishes the things I need for my hero to accomplish for me to see him as a hero instead of as a bully.
RoboCop is not a bully, dude. This is great. This is sacrilege. He's fighting the corporate bullies, dude. He's fighting the militarized police force. Are you kidding me with this?
Poopy pants.
And he's
really
horny, dude. He's so horny.
And I love that too. I like that. Yes, you've got the whole, he's horny, but what is he going to do about it? He's got no nards. He's got no robodom. He's got no libido.
I'd buy that for $1.
New targets acquired.
Alex O.
Billy Hines, C.H. Chris Dunford, The Comic Crush, Dave's Comic Heroes blog,
DC Dave, Del Dracula,
Derek W.C., Dirk Ashton, Ed Moore, at Teal Productions, Fanholes Podcast, Gavin Rizza, hashtag True Believer, yes, Hal Kolbeck, History of Comics on Film, The Irredeemable Shag, Keith G. Baker,
who also offered a winger gif in reference to the cover painter on Hunters and Killers, Kreshimir Svonarik,
Lamar the Revenger,
Leah Ellison,
Maxo, Pine Time,
Relatively Geeky Podcast Network,
Richard Field, Siskoid, Superbound, Thirsties, New and Used, and Twins Are Rising.
We received the following message on the blog. Captain Entropy here, Frank. Loved the Russia story, and now I want to see the art, especially those covers. I really enjoyed both these stories, the Terminator one for the actual story, and the RoboCop one for your snarky commentary. And you're right about Haska's work being reminiscent of John Ramona Jr. It was Haska on pencils, right? A few other thoughts. I think about Beirut fairly often, but I'm a special case. I think your point about the obvious hiring problems that would arise from randomly murdering henchmen is insightful and 100% accurate. Now that you've pointed it out, I want to read a story where the Joker has a brilliant plan, but he can't pull it off because no one will work for him. He gets caught because he tries to do everything himself. As you say, Terminator's world is objectively better than RoboCop's. Terminator's is truly alien in comparison to our regular lives. It would be objectively awful to live in, but it's radically different. So contemplating what one would do and how one would live there is a true escape. None of the old rules or heuristics would apply. In that situation, you'd have to change your entire way of life. In RoboCop's, everything's just a little worse, more corrupt, more banal, more dangerous, more unstable, and more troublesome. But most of us would still have to get up and go to work in the midst of it. It's a more corporate and capitalist version of Venezuela now, and it's so close to our reality that you can never get the thought out of your head that all this could happen. By the way, a lot of people have X'd out on X recently, while Old Spine remains on Twitter. Diablo Frank has been on Blue Sky since the invite days. If you want to touch base with him on the social media diaspora, we do not tag listeners there, since it goes against the Blue Sky culture. But we do post links to new episodes and gather comments. Our feed also goes to YouTube now, when they're not blocking a given video, so you can maybe get 2/3 of our content there. We're all old and talk too much though, so no TikTok in our future. And of course nobody is on Threads, because we're not legacy media sellouts begging for your money. In the year 2024, in the month of December,
Terminator Endgame,
and RoboCop Roulette.
You have been listening to Terminator Now, a Rolled Spine podcast. It's in no way associated with Hemdale Film Corporation, James Cameron, not even Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm just the best impersonator Frank could find. But I'm pretty good, right? No infringement of rights are intended, and it's all covered by fair use. Anyway, nobody's making any money on this thing, and hardly anyone's listening anyhow, so don't waste your lawyer's time.